Imagine this scenario, peeps. If there was a real God who loved his children, then you would think that he would have imbued within them the ability to be able to love one another and get along just fine. Because if we could do that as a species, can you imagine how advanced we would be now and the facilities we would have if we didn't put the vast majority of our energy into killing one another, controlling one another, and stealing one another's resources? So this has been the state of affairs forever, and so it seems very reasonable to me to consider that there isn't a God of that variety. And when you look into the Bible, and you've got stupid stories like the Tower of Babel, where he imposed upon every single person that they wouldn't be able to communicate with each other. Well, when we look at the world and we see the divergence of outlook on life, perspective. Now, of course, we've got culture, and I think cultures are a beautiful thing. But within cultures, of course, is a human propensity to invent, create gods. And so you're going to have those. That is beautiful. It's all well and good until one side decides that they're going to kill the others who believe in another god. And a Lord knows there are plenty of those variety around. But if you look at Hinduism, Buddhism, I think even Sikhism, Zoroastrianism, Jainism, lots of isms get along with their lives, with their God, and everything's hunky-dory. But some of these so-called gods don't like the other gods, one being Yahweh, the other being Allah. Well, they seem to hate each other, and so apparently they've inspired writings to depict this in their books, and it's very unfortunate. But if you could imagine a world whereby this wasn't so, then we'd have super high-tech cities all over the world, and you would have thought we would have eradicated poverty and cancers, all different sorts of things like that. But as it is, we're always tearing at ourselves. And so if you look at it from an evolutionary perspective, then you can get to thinking that, well, that might very well serve the species. Why? Because it keeps the numbers down. It's a constant culling of the numbers, which, if left untouched, uncompromised, there would be a whole bunch too many, probably, even though, you know, the world is pretty huge and there are vast resources out there somewhere, and there's an enormous amount of land. And so when people like Gates start to consider that the world is overpopulated, well, it seems ridiculous, to be fair, when you look at the tiny patch of the world which is inhabited. So I think by rights we could have absolutely trillions and trillions and trillions of humans all over the world. Creating cities in deserts like they have in Los Angeles and Las Vegas, places like that. where they've got huge underwater tunnels which deliver the water into the deserts. But over and above all that, the great differences we seem to have with our gods, and the propensity to be greedy and to feel insecure, which makes us want to grab at resources. And so you can see from the beginning of time, many wars were all about resources. People wanted more land. Oh, that's fertile land over there, we best go and take that. Our population's growing too much now. Can you imagine in 100 years we've run out of land? We best expand our empire. And so they did all that. But all that aside, the individual is very diverse. And what I think we're starting to realise now is that no two people see the same thing. If we are very close in our experience, in our culture, in our belief systems, this, that and the other, we can see very broadly and generally similar things, eye to eye. But we all know with our friends and families and associates that we can be massively different. And so why is that? Why do we actually have the curse of Babel upon us? Why is it that we can't harmonise? We can't aim for a very similar thing. Why is it that even in every country there seemingly are at least two factions which are very opposed to the other? Could it be that they are necessary for our evolution? Because at the end of the day, when we look at the ramifications of war and what benefits came out of war, well, there have always been many benefits, because during times of war the human being really starts to think a great deal about innovation and modification, invention of all different sorts of things, due primarily, it would seem, to necessity, needing more technological advancement for their own protection. I'm pretty sure that we could engage in a technological advancement in a better way under regular circumstances where we weren't killing each other, because the human being has a propensity to want to think and innovate. But when you look through the past, a good deal of the innovation has been how to kill our fellow human beings. So if we put our energies into something else, how to save our human beings, then I'm pretty sure that we could do that equally as well. But when we look at the individual, how completely diverse they are. And so you ask yourself, well, the world could never be any other way. Because even though the powers that be have had very sincere attempts at standardizing culture, they have failed in many ways, because we still have a propensity to be, what's that word when we fear foreigners? It slips my mind at this moment in time. It's xenophobic. We tend to be xenophobic. But even if we aren't xenophobic, we tend to have phobias in other areas, homosexual phobias, or I tend to have, I don't know whether you can say it's a phobia. I guess it could be. A probably deep-rooted phobia is agedness and infirmness and mental incapacitation and stupidness. Those sort of things, because all of those things bring the society down and they take an enormous amount of resources. So the more of those people, the more able-bodied people we need to look after them. And so can you imagine if the human being is ever going to decay into such a state whereby it's going to create its own demise, it no doubt probably will be if it insists on trying to keep the human body alive beyond its natural propensity. So if we want to make old people so comfortable and always make sure they've got enough heating, so they don't go and perish during these cold winters, well look what happens to all of animals. If they aren't strong, a harsh winter will do away with the vast majority of them, which keeps the numbers down and seems to be very positive and necessary. But if we are keeping all these old folk in old people's homes, nice and snug as bugs, then how are we serving ourselves? We're not serving ourselves at all, are we? We're shooting ourselves in the foot. This is one of the reasons, people. Those of you that live in United Kingdom at this moment in time will know that the Parliament has just introduced a new bill which states that old people won't be getting their heating allowance this year because we've got no money. All the money's gone, unfortunately. Well, yes, and we've got a good reason and knowledge as to where that money's gone, i.e. Ukraine and all the foreigners coming in and living like kings. Yeah, that's where it's all gone. So what's the option that you do? What resources do you have? What do you do with your resources? Well, we're allowing all these swarthy skinned folk who hate us, and we give them copious amounts of money, and we turn off the heating for our old folk. Because at the end of the day, well, the old ones are a burden to us. At least the young ones will probably get jobs at some stage. We can use those. That's how it is, isn't it, people? You know, when governments make these austere measures, and they announce that, yes, well, it's very unfortunate, but one of the things that we've got to do is turn off your heating through the winter. Old people? Yeah. Well, anyone could see then, well, when you've done that before, or when there's literally been no money in the country, we've seen all around the world that millions of people die because they freeze in their beds. And if you know that that's what happens, then surely that would be the last thing you're going to do. If you really did care for your elderly people, it seriously would be the last thing you're going to do, because you know what you're doing is culling the aged, aren't you? But nobody's bothered about it, nobody's in uproar about it, nobody bats an eyelid about it. They just go, oh, the government's not giving us our allowance this year, those meanies. And that's it, they all fall back to sleep. And so, I have this kind of naturalistic way of looking at things, and I'm a great adherent to if you don't fight for your rights, then you don't deserve any. And there's no reason why you should have any, because they aren't God-given. No, they're society given. They're government given. The government chooses what rights you've got. And of course we can see that they're trying to take more and more of them away from us because it suits them. And if we allow them to do that, then we're fucking idiots. They don't deserve those rights. We never did deserve them. And so, they can take them away very, very easily. But if you consider that you are sovereign entities and you do actually have rights and the governments are supposed to work for you, well, then you might want to stand up for your rights and have something to say about it. And of course, it's effort and it involves time and it's laborious and it's a ball ache and people have got to get out in the streets once again. And it is really fucking tedious, of course. But we can see all over the world what's happening. People are doing this because they've reached the end of their tether and they're saying to themselves, well, look, we've got to stop them now. Because if we don't stop them now, they're just going to keep taking. And of course, that's what they are going to do. And so I think, when we look at things like that, we can see that, if you've got one side that wants to take, and if you allow them to do that, then the world's going to be in a particular way. If you don't allow them to do certain things, then the world will be in another way. So you ask yourselves as a society how you want your world to be, how you want your country to be at least, and then you bring your government to task. And of course, throughout millennia, many people have brought governments to task. They've toppled governments in any which way. But because now it's a global thing, it's getting more difficult to topple our politicians because they will just be replaced by other robots which take their position and continue with the format which is given them. It isn't theirs. They haven't created it in Parliament by the will of the people. They haven't listened to the will of the people. They're not interested in the will of the people. Basically because they think the people are too stupid to listen to. And they're all very, very ignorant and self-serving, and they just want what they want. Well, some people, they're starting to think, well, it's not just about what you want, it's what these poor folk want in third world countries. We've got to start helping them and giving them some of the resources. And we've got to start evening things out, and we've got to start conserving some of our resources because they're finite, they're not going to go on forever. And so we need to implement austere measures to be able to safeguard our future. And okay, there's something to be said for all these arguments. But the main obstacle to the human being is that the vast majority of them aren't anything like informed enough these days. In the old days, it was much more simple. People could read a couple of newspapers because that's all there were, and industry was much more simple. They never had this AI technology, and so pretty well you could see resources being moved around and things being manufactured and laws being implemented and all that, and you could act on them. But now the technology people is so exponential, it's so vastly incredible. One of the viewers sent me a couple of videos last night about the creation of CPU units for computers. And the creation of these CPU units is absolutely astronomical. Just to create one CPU unit, it takes a whole process of 3 months, going through one process to another, and of course it's all nanotechnology. Some of these little chips, they are, let's say, 100 times smaller than the breadth of a human hair, and they've got all this intricate circuitry. I'm like, how do they actually create these very, very fine nano circuits? It just seems beyond me. I suppose there's a video out there which is going to talk people through it, but it's absolutely unfathomable to me, because it's an area of knowledge that I'm not endowed with any of the answers at all. But when you look at the mobile phones that we're using, the massive technological advances, well, we can very easily see that by being ignorant to that level of technology, we relinquish our rights. Because if we're going to have rights, we have to have knowledge about what's going on. But if we don't know what's going on, then how can we say that we don't want this or we do want that? And how can we even have an opinion that's going to be respected and taken seriously when we're so ignorant? You know, it's almost like we have become primates again now. You know, we've got no idea how anything works. And that's the problem when we've got these quantum computers that build all this technology and store all this information. They store every single last speck of human information. And so, well, I mean, we are already third-class citizens. We're no longer anything like as important as we used to think we were. And so, you know, the future is pretty terrifying, I suppose, from the biological pink ape's perspective, because I can readily see very, very soon that the biology aspect of the human being will be considered to be very, very primitive and not necessary. And as soon as they can replicate the functionality of the human being via a robot, then they will take over. So when they have the capacity to be able to have like sentient or conscious to a degree, whatever, we don't even know what consciousness is, so how can we ever say who's got it or who hasn't? We you know, these plants could have consciousness. We've got no idea what it is, absolutely no idea. But if you have a robot that can do everything that a human being can do, then why would you want human beings on the planet? Or why would humans want bodies? If you can have a roboticized body with any number of components which could just easily be replaced. And so if you are like a brain in a jar, well, you know, why wouldn't people opt for that? You know, you never die and all this sort of thing. So yeah, we've got all this to look forward to. Well, some people have. But you see, the human being, individually, they're nothing. And this is where most of us, we fall down. Because of our ego, we think we are something. And we think we are individual, we think we've got rights, and we think this and we think that. When at the end of the day, I don't think the cosmos looks at it like that. The cosmos just looks at it like bacteria in a petri dish. We are a member of the virus, or, you know, the species, whatever you want to call it. But the individual has never been important. And so why would anybody think they're important? Oh, my rights, and I want this and I want that. You see, the powers that rule the world now are not interested in individual rights. They really despise them, because they have got a picture which is vastly years ahead, and they're working towards that, and they're not stopping for any silly billies wants, needs and requirements outside of the main theme of what's going on in the world. And so the human being has had the rug pulled from under its feet. They aren't important, they're no longer significant, and I suppose we all just better start accepting that AI is here now. The world is changing massively, and in no time at all we'll all be dead, and whatever's born or created, they will be the footmen of the new world, and they'll have completely different programs, completely different levels of education, and probably the ego will be completely eradicated. Because the ego is a major deficit. It served early hominids, it served them very well, but the ego is going to become a major obstacle, because the ego is always causing division and separation and altercation. And this is why the world now, the powers that be, are not listening to the individual. They're not listening to herds or hordes. They're not listening to cultures. They're not listening to nations. They're not listening, people. They've got their contrived trajectory, and that's what they're heading for. And who knows what they consider it's going to be in their benevolence or malevolence. Who knows whether it's benevolent or malevolent? Maybe it's a bit of both.